Imagine a world wrapped in mist, where the edges of the map were blank. For centuries, this was our reality. The year is 1500. The known world is a small, bright circle surrounded by an ocean of mystery. People believed monsters lurked in the deep and the sea boiled at the equator. But a new feeling was stirring in the hearts of men and women across Europe, a whisper of curiosity, a hunger for what lay beyond the horizon. This wasn't just about maps, it was about changing the world forever. At the dawn of the 16th century, Europe was a continent waking from a long slumber. Cities like Lisbon, Seville, and London were buzzing with energy. The streets were narrow, crowded, and alive with the sounds of horse-drawn carts, merchants hawking their wares, and ship bells ringing in the harbor. Life, for most people, was tied to the land and the seasons. They farmed, they prayed, and they rarely traveled more than a few miles from where they were born. Their world was small, defined by the local church, the village market, and the castle on the hill. But in the port, a different story was unfolding. Here, sailors with weathered faces shared tales of distant lands, of strange spices and shimmering silks that came from the east. These goods were incredibly expensive, traveling thousands of miles over land on routes controlled by rival empires. The dream of finding a direct sea route to the Indies, to the source of this wealth, became an obsession. It was a dream fueled by a powerful mix of greed, faith, and a thirst for glory. Kings and queens, bankers and merchants all saw the potential. A successful voyage could make a kingdom rich and a captain a legend. The technology to make these dreams a reality was finally coming together. Shipbuilders were creating new kinds of vessels, like the caravel. These ships were smaller, faster, and more maneuverable than the heavy galleys of the past. They could sail against the wind, a revolutionary advantage. Navigators were learning to use new tools like the astrolabe and the quadrant to measure their position by the stars. Maps were becoming more accurate, though they were still filled with guesswork and fantasy. These ships were tiny, wooden worlds tossed on a vast and unforgiving ocean. A single voyage could last for months, even years. Life on board was harsh. Food was scarce and often spoiled, water turned foul, and disease was rampant. But for the men who signed on, the risk was worth the potential reward, a share of immense riches, and a story to tell for the rest of their lives. In 1492, Christopher Columbus, sailing for Spain, had stumbled upon a world entirely unknown to Europeans. He died believing he had reached the outskirts of Asia, but others soon realized the truth. This was a new world. The race was on. In 1497, John Cabot, sailing for England, reached the shores of North America. A year later, Vasco da Gama of Portugal finally achieved the impossible. He sailed around the southern tip of Africa and reached India, opening a direct sea route to the treasures of the East. The floodgates of exploration were thrown wide open. Spanish conquistadors, driven by rumors of golden cities, pushed deep into the American continents. In Iwijo, Hernan Cortes arrived in Mexico with just a few hundred men. He found the Aztec Empire, a sophisticated civilization with a magnificent capital city. Tenochtitlan, larger than any in Europe. The Aztecs were fierce warriors with a complex society, but they were vulnerable. The Spanish had steel weapons, armor, horses, and firearms, things the Aztecs had never seen. More devastatingly, the Europeans brought diseases like smallpox, to which the native peoples had no immunity. Within a few short years, the mighty Aztec Empire had crumbled. A similar fate befell the Inca Empire in Peru at the hands of Francisco Pizarro. The wealth that flowed back to Spain from these conquests was staggering, funding its rise as a global superpower. Meanwhile, another epic journey was underway. In 1519, Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese explorer in the service of Spain, set out with 5 ships to find a western passage to the Spice Islands. His expedition would become the first to circumnavigate the globe. It was a brutal 3-year ordeal. Magellan himself was killed in the Philippines, and only one ship, the Victorio, with just 18 surviving crew members, made it back to Spain. Their journey proved definitively that the world was round and far larger than anyone had imagined. It shattered old maps and old ways of thinking. These voyages connected the world in ways that were both brilliant and brutal. A vast global exchange began, what we now call the Columbian Exchange. From the Americas, Europe received potatoes, tomatoes, corn, chocolate, and tobacco. These new crops would revolutionize diets and agriculture across the Old World. In return, Europe brought wheat, sugar, cattle, pigs, and horses to the Americas, transforming its landscapes and cultures. But this exchange had a dark side. The spread of European diseases wiped out an estimated 90% of the indigenous population of the Americas. The demand for labor on sugar and tobacco plantations also gave rise to the transatlantic slave trade, a system of unimaginable cruelty that would forcibly move millions of Africans across the ocean, leaving a legacy of pain that endures to this day. The stories of this era are vast, and it is easy for the details, the human faces, to get lost in the sweep of history. If remembering these moments matters to you, stay with us as we uncover more. The world was being redrawn, not just on maps, but in the minds of people everywhere. The old certainties were gone. The discovery of new continents and new peoples challenged long-held religious and philosophical beliefs. How did these people fit into the biblical story of creation? Were they fully human? These were urgent, difficult questions. The flood of new information sparked a scientific revolution. Astronomy, botany, geography, and anthropology all flourished as scholars tried to make sense of a suddenly much larger and more complex world. The printing press helped spread these new ideas and discoveries faster than ever before, but this age of wonder was also an age of intense conflict. The wealth pouring in from the colonies made the rival kingdoms of Europe, Portugal, England, France, and the Netherlands even fiercer competitors. They fought over trade routes, over colonial territories, and over the souls of the people they encountered. The seas became a battleground for pirates, privateers, and naval fleets. Sir Francis Drake of England, seen as a hero at home, was considered a ruthless pirate by the Spanish, raiding their treasure ships and colonies. The clash of empires was a global struggle for dominance, and the stakes were nothing less than control of the future. By the end of the 1500s, the world had fundamentally changed. The initial frantic rush of discovery was settling into a more systematic process of colonization and exploitation. The small, isolated worlds of 1490 had been woven together into a single global network of trade, conflict, and culture. The consequences were immense and irreversible. The centers of power had shifted from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. The economies of entire continents were now linked, for better and for worse. Looking back, the age of exploration is a story of incredible courage and breathtaking ambition. It is a story of human ingenuity, of pushing the limits of what was thought possible. But it is also a story of greed, violence, and profound tragedy. It is the story of how our modern, interconnected world was born, a world shaped by the echoes of those first voyages into the unknown. The legacies of this era are all around us, in the food we eat, the languages we speak, and the complex tapestry of our global society. It reminds us that history is never just about the past. It is the story of how we got to now. If these journeys into the past move you, consider liking this video and subscribing. There are many more stories of our shared world waiting to be told. The map of our world may now be complete, but the map of our history still holds countless mysteries.